Disney lied about Beauty and the Beast. Disney told you the Beast was cursed because he was cruel. Because he turned away a helpless old woman on a cold night and needed to learn a lesson about what was inside him. That is an easier story to tell. It is not the true one. The real Beauty and the Beast was written in 1740 by a French author named Gabriel Suzanne Barbauld de Villeneuve. Not a fairy tale for children. A full novel. Over 100 pages of something so layered and so uncomfortable that every single version that came after it spent the next 250 years trying to make it simpler, softer, safer. Here is what they kept making simpler. The prince loses his father as a young boy. His mother, a queen, must go to war to defend their kingdom and leaves him in the care of a powerful fairy. He grows up in her castle. He sees her every single day. He trusts her the way you trust someone who has been there for everything. She is the closest thing to a mother he has ever known. When the prince becomes a man, she makes an announcement. She tells him she intends to marry him. He refuses. Immediately. Completely. Without hesitation. And she does not accept it. She curses him. Transforms him into something monstrous. Not as a lesson, not as a punishment for cruelty or arrogance or selfishness. As revenge. The pure, cold revenge of someone who was told no by the one person she believed had no right to refuse her. That is why the Beast exists. A young man destroyed for saying no to the woman who raised him. Disney removed every single word of this and replaced it with an old beggar woman and a lesson about judging by appearances. Now here is what Disney removed about Beauty. She is not a merchant's daughter who loves books and dreams of something more. In the original, a good fairy eventually reveals that Beauty is the hidden child of a king and a fairy princess. She was switched at birth with a merchant's dead daughter to protect her from a wicked fairy who wanted to murder her as an infant so she could marry Beauty's father herself. Beauty has been living a false identity her entire life without knowing it. A false name, a false family, a false family. A false world. The life she believed was hers was a cover story built by people who never told her. Disney replaced all of that with a small town, an inventor, and a song about wanting more. But what happens inside the castle every night is where the original story becomes something no animated film will ever show you. Every night, the Beast and Beauty sit across from each other at an enormous candle-lit table. And every night he asks her the same question. Not will you marry me? In Villeneuve's original, the Beast asks Beauty to sleep with him every night. The same question, the same answer, the same answer. She says no.
It is done.
Every time. And he accepts it. Every time. No punishment, no anger, no force, no consequence for her refusal beyond his own quiet devastation. He asks, she declines. And he lets it be. The entire emotional core of the original story is built around that exchange. Around a woman's right to refuse something that frightens her. Around a monstrous figure who's given every opportunity to use his power and never does. Disney understood that a ballroom scene was easier to animate than a conversation about consent. So that is what they gave you. But here is the part of this story that changes everything. Beauty and the Beast was not invented. It was inspired by a real man and a real woman whose story traveled through the courts of Europe for 200 years before Villeneuve ever put pen to paper. His name was Petrus Gonsalves. He was born in the 1500s on the Canary Islands with a condition called hypertrichosis. His entire face and body were covered in thick, dark hair from birth. He looked exactly like the Beast. As a young child, he was taken from his home and given as a gift to the King of France, not as a person. As a curiosity, an experiment. The king wanted to know if something that looked like a monster could be educated into a man. Petrus was educated. He became fluent in Latin, French, and Spanish. He became a scholar, a gentleman, a man of refinement and intelligence who moved through one of the most sophisticated courts in Europe. And then the king gave him wife. Her name was Catherine Raffelin. She was a young noblewoman. She had no warning. She had no warning of what she was walking into. No preparation. No choice in the matter at all. She was brought to the palace and presented with a man whose face and body were entirely covered in hair and told this was her husband. That was her wedding day. She had never seen him before that moment. What happened next is the part that no one who tells this story ever fully prepares you for. They fell in love. Not reluctantly. Not eventually. Genuinely and completely. They built a life together. They had 7 children. They traveled through the royal courts of Europe together for decades. Kings and queens invited them because Petrus and Catherine were extraordinary. Not as a spectacle. As a couple. As a couple. As a couple. As 2 people who had been handed an impossible situation and chosen each other completely inside it. She was not a monster. She was not a victim. There was a real beast. There was a real beauty. And what they chose to build together was more human and more honest than anything that came after. Villeneuve knew their story when she wrote her novel in 1740. She took something real and turned it into a warning that looked like a fairy tale. A story about power, about consent, about what it means to see a person that the world has already decided is not one. Disney took that story and removed the real curse. Removed beauty's true identity. Removed the question asked every single night. Removed Petrus and Catherine entirely. Removed Petrus and Catherine entirely. Removed everything that made it true and replaced it with something that was easier to sell. The original novel has existed since 1740. The real story of Petrus and Catherine has existed since the 1500s. You were always there. You just were not supposed to find them. And in that story, Disney did not just soften the original. They took a real person's life, changed what actually happened, and turned documented historical tragedy into a love story with a happy ending. If this surprised you, subscribe and share for more.